Hey, everybody. I'm Dave Swartz, and welcome to another episode of Dose of Dave. So, I took a little bit of time off to get married, and so it was a good, I think, rest period for myself. I was able to, take some time to, I think, give myself some rest that I normally don't give myself. To not only give myself rest physically, but mentally. I think a lot of us think of rest in terms of physical rest, not necessarily mental rest. So sometimes I think in order to get a mental rest, we need to kind of take ourselves out of our daily routine, or to think about things that we don't normally think about. And in that way, you're kind of taking your mind out of the normal stuff that we're constantly stressed out about or constantly, rolling through our brains. And that's kind of part of what I want to talk about today, because one of the major things that I've been confronting this past week and for a while now, I'd say, is the ego. My ego specifically, obviously. Everybody's ego is unique to them. It is personal. It is something that can be very helpful at times, but it can also be very harmful and not as encouraging or supportive as other aspects of your being. So, ego. What is ego? Ego is a little difficult to kind of pin down. However, I will say that the typical description or the thing that I think about when I think about the ego is I think about the aspect of ourselves that creates and reinforces our individuality. So as I've talked about many times before on this show, the idea that we are all just vibrating energy. The universe is nothing but an infinite wave of constant potential energy just out there in the universe. There's no time, there's no space. Actually, I would venture to say that a large proportion of consciousness is actually non-physical. So the physical aspects of consciousness, what we know to be ourselves and the world around us, we are detached from that all consciousness being, that ocean of infinite potential, right? We've essentially taken, if you want to, actually the ocean is a great metaphor. If you were to think about the ocean as being all of consciousness, or one ocean, if it were, you were to take one droplet of water out of that ocean, that's the individual. And then within that individual drop of water, there is a construct called the ego. And in that, I say a construct because it's an illusion. It is a tool in which we use in order to separate ourselves from other people. The ego is constantly reinforcing that. The ego is constantly trying to remind you not only that you're an individual, but it's trying to reinforce your individual wants, desires, needs. So a lot of times I think we can fall victim to the power and the control of the ego very easily, because it's very tempting, obviously. I mean, the ego essentially is a voice in your brain telling you exactly what you want to hear all the time, usually. And it may not necessarily be exactly what you want to hear, but it's what the individual personal, person that you may be, feels that they are important, feels that they are, special, makes them feel as though they're above and beyond the rest. And that can be an issue if you allow that to run amok. If you're not necessarily able to see beyond that. Because if you're not able to see beyond that, then you will become disillusioned. You will be in a reality that is not true because it is through a veil of your own ego mind. You have to maintain a balance between, your ego and, I would say, who you really are. And who you really are is an infinite being of love. And for me, one of the things that I've noticed in my life is that the ego shows up a lot when it comes to comparison, when it comes to feelings of jealousy, feelings of, fear, things like, I see a happy couple and I'm, this is back when I was single, not married, see a happy couple and I wanted what they had, but I didn't know if it would ever happen. So, that's sort of, in a way, my ego, like saying to me in a way, like, no, like, not going to happen. Like, you should prepare yourself for the fact that it might not happen. Be afraid of that. Because if you can prepare yourself for those emotions, then if it actually does happen, then you won't necessarily be as hurt by it. And that's sort of the mentality that I worked with for a long time, was that if I could confront a lot of really dark, horrible ideas, or eventualities that I didn't want to have happen, that if I could come to terms with them not happening, that I would be more prepared in the future. I would feel more safe and secure that if it didn't happen, I would be okay. And a lot of what the ego does is it is trying to keep you in this sense of feeling safe, a sense of feeling protected, a sense of survival. And that, as we've talked about on the show, is just not a good place to manifest from. It's not a good place to live from. And again, all of what I'm just talking about is essentially trying to convince the real you, the part of you that is just focused on love, focused on, your own love for yourself, who you are, the body in which you embody, the life in which you live, the people around you, all of those things. It's trying to convince you that those aren't the things that you need, that you only need these other superficial things that are going to be signifiers of success and of security and safety, right? One of those things I remember back when I was dating too, when you go through a relationship and you get dumped or things don't work out and you move on to the next, it's rough, and you don't feel as though you're going to be connected back to that same feeling again. You feel like this sense of, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. And that can kind of, again, reinforce this not happening, right? If you're focusing so much on a particular outcome, especially if it's an outcome you don't want to have happen, you're going to give that outcome energy, and that manifests into reality. So when it comes to the ego, what we want to try to do our best is not forsake it, not to kill it. Because a lot of people say, like, oh, you're experiencing an ego death. Well, yeah, in a way it is dying, but it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's necessarily dying in the sense that I don't think any part of us really dies. It's just transitioned into something different. So what I would say instead is that it's not necessarily an ego death, it's more of an ego transition. So you're in a new place with your ego, a new relationship, a new understanding, so that it's not a hindrance on you anymore. It's more of what it's meant to be, a tool in which we can perceive reality. One of the things I was thinking about the other day and kind of putting into practice more and more, because it is challenging. For myself, I will say that, I've been working for several years on trying to, I shouldn't say trying, God, I say that so much. I have been working on creating a freelance art career for myself, where I can sort of just do the projects that I want to do, even if they're my own projects, and not have to necessarily be, tied down to a 9 to 5 job or a regular kind of schedule. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's easier for some, not as easier for others. And I think for me, I feel like I have been working for a long time with not as much of a payout, or is not as much of a payout as I would wanted thus far. So I was hoping for more financial security, and more professional success, I will say. And I haven't quite hit that place yet. I haven't quite found that place yet where I feel, feel solid. I feel good. And it's resulted in a lot of angst and a lot of my own jealousy and comparison when it comes to other people and other colleagues, and not even people that are in my same field, but just people in general that have excelled at their field or excelled at their passion, and have quite literally created this life of seemingly infinite abundance where they can manifest whatever they want and create whatever they want. And as I've talked about before, I think I have some angst when it comes to not it having happened yet for me. So with that, looking at other people and observing them in their element. Prime example, I was watching this this concert on YouTube, and it was one of my favorite artists, Grizz. He's I would say like an EDM funkadelic kind of crazy guy. He is just an amazing spirit, amazing dude. Actually from the Michigan area. And so I fell in love with him a couple years ago when we went to a concert of his out here. And so he released this movie of a compatible piece with his new album that he just released. And so we were watching it last night, and I could feel myself, being angry, and I was just like, what the fuck, man? Like, I just want to enjoy this. Like, why is my ego going there? Like, I don't want to think about these things right now, but nevertheless, these thoughts are coming to my mind, and they're thoughts of, jealousy, because, sure, I would love to do something like that. That looks pretty fun. Thoughts of, anxiety, man, he's accomplished a lot at such a young age. That's pretty amazing. I'm sad about it that I haven't. Things like he is clearly absolutely in love with what he's doing, and I feel like I struggle every day. Now again, these are all ego-driven thoughts. Thoughts are not necessarily your own. So, these thoughts are coming up from a program that has been reinforced by society. And what this is telling us is that, this is what our collective consciousness is thinking about a lot. I think as a collective, we do have a lot of these thoughts of jealousy, of comparison, anxiety, that, others have achieved what we haven't, and that we're upset about that. And, in the moment, I took a step back and I thought, this is just, I'm killing my own enjoyment of this movie, this musical visual experience. And so I took a moment, I took a breath, I disconnected from those feelings for a second, and I consciously made the choice to connect to him, to try and connect to the feelings, the emotions that he is experiencing at that moment. Because again, time, space doesn't exist. So I can connect to someone who was experiencing something in the past just as much as I can connect to someone that's experiencing something in the future. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's possible. So when I was watching this last night, I got this, feeling like, you know what, I can take a step back. I can re-establish my thoughts, and I want to connect to what he's feeling, the joy he's feeling, because I could see it. I could see it in his face. I could see it in his body language. He was just having a hell of a good time. And that comes through with the energy of the movie, with the energy of the music. And if you can connect to that, that will help you to check your ego, to put your ego in balance with this other aspect of you, this other infinitely imaginative, creative part of you. So I went back into it, and like I said, I took a breath. I refocused on him and his joy. And what happened was I began to feel this overwhelming welling of emotion, this sense of joy and love and passion. It was all just sort of erupting out, and that right there is an example of the power of checking your ego and not allowing it to destroy your enjoyment of the moment and your enjoyment of your future manifestations. Because every time you disconnect from it, every time you choose the ego instead of the all, because the ego is just one part of the pie. You need to pull back on that and think about the whole pie. Think about the whole aspect of who you are, because you're not just the individual. You are still at some part of you, some portion of you is still connected to the all, the infinite mind, the infinite consciousness that is all of the universe. So if you can connect to all of that, if you can connect to who you are as an individual and put it all together, now we're really talking about balance. Now we're really becoming a whole individual. And it's weird that I say that because it's paradoxical. But remember, everything in the universe is paradoxical. So if you're on that if you're on that paradoxical track, you're probably on the right track. So just to wrap this idea up, when it comes to the ego, I think the easiest way to recognize it is when there are thoughts running through your brain that don't necessarily mesh with who you are inside. Yeah, sure, it's part of you. All those thoughts are part of you. All those aspects of yourself that you're not necessarily as flattered when you think about it. But it's all part of who you are, and that's all the stuff that you need to think about when you get into these moments of comparison, of jealousy, of anger, of regret, resentment, things like that. Because all of these are ego-driven feelings. They're trying to remind you that you are you. It's trying to protect you. It's trying to say that other people are wrong and you are the only person that is right. And I don't think that's very healthy, because it doesn't take in all of reality, right? So think about that next time you start having ego-driven thoughts, or you have thoughts where you're not necessarily taking another person's perspective into consideration. I think that's another good practice in order to be able to check your ego, to transition your ego into something more useful. Recognize, is this thought supportive of who I am, or is this thought unsupportive of who I am? And then pull back, and if it's not, figure out why. Ask yourself why all the way back until you can't answer that question anymore. And that'll help you to figure out the root of a lot of what these ego triggers are, because everybody has different ego triggers that that just sort of pop up. I know for myself, I have a major issue when it comes to career and success. So if anything comes at me like that, I know that I might have to work a little bit extra in my own mind and my own being to be able to balance those thoughts and feelings within myself. Might be different for somebody else, and you might change, as you develop and change yourself. So anyway, we've hit the 20-minute mark. I think I've really nailed the ego talk for today. Plus, I've got noisy neighbors outside that refuse to keep it quiet. So anyway, we're going to sign off for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this new episode of Dose of Dave. Next weekend will be another wedding weekend, so I don't think I'll be on next week. But I'm hopeful that I can come back the following week. I don't want to miss out on too many Dose of Daves because of weddings, but we are having a wedding season this summer, so I want to make sure that I give time for that as well. So just a couple last minute thoughts. If you guys haven't checked out the podcast that my wife and I do, Elizabeth, called Higher Consciousness, you can check out Higher Consciousness wherever you get your podcasts. We also do a YouTube video series as well, so you can check out our YouTube channel for more. Subscribe there for all of our crazy videos. We also do these wake and bake videos that are just live, short little episodes on Thursday mornings. So lots of stuff to check out there with our Higher Consciousness podcast, as well as my comic book that is still on IndieGoGo right now for a little while longer. It's called The Confederate Monster. Basically brings the world of Frankenstein into the Civil War. It's a really cool comic. I'm actually just finishing up the prequel, the issue 0 of it right now. I've got about 10 more pages to go. And I'm just super excited about that one because it's just so much Frankenstein goodness. So anyway, take care, guys. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you in, I don't know, a couple weeks. We'll see. I'm not sure. Bye-bye.